Welcome to the Primus Project Podcast. The mission of the Primus Project is to explore the relationship between Trinity College, white supremacy, and slavery. The purpose of this podcast is to empower the Trinity community to think through the college's challenging histories and begin efforts of repair. The Primus Project Podcast is recorded in Trinity's Rather Library Studios in Hartford, Connecticut.
Hi, this is Scott. Nicole and I want to wish everyone a wonderful winter holiday season and a happy new year. Back in September, the Primus Project hosted a commemorative event celebrating the installation of a headstone for our namesake, Rebecca Primus. Then in October, we sat down with Jesse Harris, a Primus family descendant, to hear about his family and his work keeping the Primus family history alive. Let's take a listen.
On the afternoon of September 5th, more than 50 people gathered in Zion Hill Cemetery on a sweltering hot day. I mean, I was sweating. I don't know. It was really hot. But it was all worth it to celebrate the Primus family and its descendants. We all sat closely in neatly ordered rows, knees practically touching under a tent, listening intently to the words of our many speakers.
Nicole's totally right. It was so hot that day. We ran out of water quick. There were people under the tent. There were people outside of the tent. We had about 50 all together who showed up. And we listened to a variety of different speakers. Dr. Elizabeth Way from New York City, Dr. Reverend John Selders from Trinity College, Dan Lugo, the president of Trinity College, Susan Beisowitz, the lieutenant governor of Connecticut. But the real special part of the event was to hear from the descendants of the Primus family, the Harrises. Who did we hear from, Nicole?
We heard from a variety of Primus family descendants, including the Reverend Dr. Gloria Harris Cater, who opened the ceremony with a prayer, Jesse Harris, Jacqueline Harris, and Chaya Harris.
Here's a clip from the Reverend Dr. Harris Cater.
O God, our Creator, the author and finisher of our lives, our protector and our provider, we come to you this afternoon, standing on this sacred ground in Hartford, Connecticut, thanking you for the life and legacy of Miss Rebecca Primus. We know that Miss Primus, or Aunt Becky, as my grandfather Jesse called her, was a woman of faith, and she knew that God was her present help, a shelter from the storms of life, and her hopeful future.
During the ceremony, the descendant Jacqueline Harris imagined writing a letter in the voice of Rebecca Primus. Here's what she shared.
It warms my heart to no end to see all of you gathered here, and to know that my life and all of my efforts to fulfill my purpose mattered to you. The true teacher and student that I am, I understood the assignment. I did what I had to do. I always tried to be the best that I could be. It was very hard for a Black, intelligent woman to take the space that she needed to live. But I survived and I thrived. I would do it all again if I could. It is up to you now.
In this clip, Chaya Harris offers a personal window into the experience and the responsibility of being an educator in the Primus family.
I'm also feeling really privileged and honored to be here today, and it's kind of just hitting me. So good afternoon. My name's Chaya. I'm Jesse's daughter, and growing up, learning from his examples of humility and compassion alongside my dedicated and steadfast aunts, becoming an educator myself, it's no surprise that the legacy of service that Rebecca left carried on through our ancestors. I will read a letter that Rebecca wrote in 1867, as published in Beloved Sisters and Loving Friends.
In the final clip that we're going to share from the ceremony, Jesse Harris reads from the plaque installed by the Connecticut Freedom Trail at the Primus family resting ground.
This sacred ground honors the Primus family, whose lives stretched from the age of enslavement to the dawn of the civil rights era. Rebecca Primus, a courageous educator, taught newly freed people in the South after the Civil War. Her letters with Addie Brown remain one of the most intimate records of Black women's lives in 19th century America. Buried beside her are her parents, Holdridge and Mehetable, who were pillars of Hartford's early Black community, along with nieces, Bessie and Edna, whose names had long gone unmarked. Her brother Nelson, an artist, rests in California. Their ancestor, Gad Asher, an enslaved man, earned his freedom fighting in the Revolutionary War. Together, their stories speak of faith, education, family, and freedom. In 2025, the Harris family, descendants of this remarkable lineage, and in partnership with Trinity College, restored these graves and reclaimed a chapter of Connecticut's past. This place is not just a burial site. It is a living testament to Black resilience, memory, and hope.
We were on the southwestern hill of Zion Hill Cemetery. It's a place that has the resting ground of the Primus family, which is one of Connecticut's most distinguished African-American families, right? Their roots in the state reach way back, right? All the way to the mid-18th century. It's a really kind of peaceful site, and if you haven't been there, the cemetery sits right next to Trinity College. It's beautiful, it's peaceful, serene. The city of Hartford takes great care of this site. And this particular site, the Primus family resting ground, holds generations of stories of people who shaped Black life in Hartford and New England through education and faith and public service and artistry. At this site rests Holdridge Primus, who was alive from 1815 to 1884, and his wife Mehetable Primus, 1817 to 1899. Their daughters, Rebecca Primus Thomas, 1837 to 1932, the namesake of the Primus Project here at Trinity College. Her sister, Henrietta Primus Mitchell, 1839 to 1920, and Isabel Primus Edwards, 1845 to 1920. They're also the granddaughters of Holdridge and Mehetable, Bessie Edwards, 1850 to 1914, Edna Edwards, 1882 to 1955, and Lucille Edwards, 1877 to 1897, and Nellie Edwards Singleton, 1875 to 1932. Right? The lives of the Primus family are people who bore witness to a powerful legacy of Black resilience, of leadership, of civic engagement in Connecticut, New England, and in the North.
The event was called Marked in Memory, a tribute to the Primus family. However, Rebecca, who was a particularly esteemed and iconic member of the Primus family, received special attention at the event due to her achievement as a premier educator throughout the 19th century within the Black public school system that existed in churches. She also went to Maryland during the Civil War to teach recently freed men and women. I think the coolest part about history is that it finds meaning and purpose in everyday life. In this context, that's finding meaning and purpose in everyday Black life, which matters because we aren't often told the truth or facts are omitted about the inner lives of Black people. I think the memory of Rebecca Primus illustrates where a big heart and a dream can take you. The letters and writings that Rebecca Primus leaves behind gives us amazing insight into not just her everyday life, but also her emotional world, which I believe can be a rarity. In this way, studying and learning about Rebecca Primus sometimes feels like you know her personally, just because of how closely one gets to bond with her as we read her letters or learn about her passion, love, and dedication for teaching. At least that's what it's been like for me.
In October, Nicole and I sat down in the studio with Jessie Harris, the Primus family descendant who's been leading the effort to keep the Primus family story alive. Over the last few months, we've gotten to know Jessie well, and this conversation reflects that. It's curious, it's wide-ranging, and deeply personal. We talk about what drives his work and about the people he's determined to remember. Rebecca, of course, but also her parents, Holdridge and Mehetable, and one figure who too often gets left out of the conversation, Rebecca's brother, Nelson Primus. Nelson lived from 1843 to 1916. He isn't buried at Zion Hill Cemetery. He's buried in Colma, California, and he was a noted portrait artist in his time. As you'll hear, Jessie is also working to track down Nelson's surviving artwork. Here's our conversation.
So, Jesse, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you grew up, what you do, and just anything you want our listeners to know about you and your family?
Yeah, sure. I was born in Boston, 1956. I don't mind giving away my age. 1956 in Boston to Fletcher and Annabelle Harris. I am the youngest, the baby of 3 children, Gloria and Jackie, my sisters. I had another sister in another sister in Detroit named Myrna. And I still live in Boston, in Dorchester, with my wife, Donna. We have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. 3 adult children, I should say. I got to get this right sometimes. 3 adult children and 5 grandchildren. I am semi-retired. I work at the Boston Globe part-time, where I've worked for 35 plus years on the copy desk. And prior to that, one of my Hartford connections is I went to Northeastern University in Boston, attended Emerson College for about a semester. And I met my wife, Donna, at Northeastern, and she went to Wheelock College. One of the things is in my newspaper career, my first cooperative education job at Northeastern was at the Hartford Current, when they still had the physical building. I think do they still have the physical building? That was my first co-op job. I worked down here for 3 months, and I worked with another student, and we worked on the obituary desk. And it was a great, great job, a great learning experience. I learned how to type fast. I learned how to talk with people on the phone. It was a great training ground because that's where you need to get your facts right of, names, dates, that kind of thing.
So it's no surprise that you spend a good deal of your time walking around cemeteries in 2025.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, somebody's got to do it. You know? You never know what you're going to find.
So you were walking around the Primus grounds.
Yeah. I stopped here. As a matter of fact, I stopped up there before I came over here just to check, make sure everything is okay. And it looks good up there too. Doing the event was a highlight, and we all still talk about it. It was a great day and a great thing that we did to do that, get the recognition up there, and it was sorely needed. Getting a stone there for Rebecca and for her 2 nieces, and just recognizing the whole family and getting that whole area, like I say, recognized and cleaned up.
Yeah.
So people know it's there.
Great. It looks great. And the feedback from the event has been great. And I keep on telling people you have to scan the QR code in the cemetery, because then we get notified, and it's one of the small joys in our digital lives. When I
did, and it worked great too.
And I have a message in my email that says, you got to scan, so it's certainly wonderful.
Yeah. Scott, I'm doing great. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you and Nicole. And like I've told you guys probably about 10 times before, I love this campus. So this is great. So this is I'm hoping it's going to be inspiring also for me to talk and be able to discuss my family journey and discoveries and things I've sort of run into during this journey.
Excellent. So I'm going to start us off today because it's something I've always been interested in, because Jesse, you and I met through a mutual connection through a genealogist down by the shoreline in Connecticut who you were working with on another project. And so I've always known you as the Primus family descendant. But I'm wondering actually how you usually introduce that part of yourself, your identity, to people. Like, do you just walk around the streets introducing yourself as a Primus family descendant, or how does that work?
Well, that's an interesting question. I have in the past, and I've also introduced myself as an ancestor of the Primus family. I've introduced myself as part of the Primus family, but I always make sure I try to explain it so it makes sense to people, as opposed to saying, well, I'm the grandson, or Rebecca Primus was my grand aunt. I always say, well, my grandmother, who was adopted, pretty likely officially adopted into the Primus family around 1875, 1876. She's my grandmother, definitely. Now, one of the reasons I've been working on my ancestry and going back, and putting together my family roots, is that I do not know where my grandmother came from in terms of her parents, if she was adopted into the Primus family, who were her biological parents, mother and father. Where did they come from? Where did she come from? So I use that as my starting point to both go forward with putting together my family with aunts and uncles and my grandfather, and also going backwards in terms of trying to find out my grandmother's origins. So it can vary. But I always say I am related to the Primuses.
Yeah. Nicole, what does this make you think about?
I was just wondering when you first learned that you were related to Rebecca Primus.
I first learned from the late, great Barbara Beeching, was a historian at Trinity College, and she did a lot of the, I'm going to say, grunt work and research, early research into the Primus family of Hartford as part of her dissertation.
Did she contact you?
Yes, she did, as a matter of fact.
That's really cool.
And we happened to have a chance meeting at the Connecticut Historical Museum. And we were both there on the same day. And we got to chatting, and she was telling me about her research. And at the time, I was telling her about my little scant research because I hadn't really done much at all because I didn't know where to start. And we talked about it, and she mentioned that she was working on the book and that she would send me a proof when she was, ready to have it published. And I said, great, I'd appreciate that. And she sent it to me, I think it was maybe a year later. And it was great. And that's where our relationship sort of picked up. And I was able to start to do more on my family history because Barbara had laid the groundwork. Mm-hmm. And I was able to come down, visit the state archives, do some research on my own. There were more than once that I've spent several days in Hartford. And I'd spend my days up at the state library, just going through files and, making my eyes hurt and this and that. But it was a good experience. It was a great experience for me because it helped me sort of learn to look into these things and the research. And of course, there are a lot of helpful people up there to get me through it. And it kind of went from there. And as I talked to my family more, it was tough because both my mother and father had passed by then. I really got into the research, and it was hard to get information on the family. And a lot of my aunts and uncles had already passed also. Before this sort of started clicking in my head, the importance of collecting this information and sort of getting it in space. But another thing that kind of got me going is my Uncle Nat, who had lived in New York City. He had started 100 years of the Harris family, a little genealogy book of my grandfather and my grandmother, all their kids, pictures, documents from my grandfather growing up. And it was great. It was a gold mine of information of my family, of my aunts, of my uncles, where they lived, where they were born, which was critical information. That got me going too. And I was able to sort of build upon that. So the work that my Uncle Nat had done and that people like Barbara Beeching had done gave me a springboard to do what I needed to do to sort of keep it going a little bit. And it was great. And I'll admit, I had periods where I really couldn't do much because life happened. I was married. My wife was married. We were both working, raising kids. And so, sometimes some things have to take a little bit of a pause. But I've never stopped looking or at least having things rolling around in my head that I want to do at some point because I always want to get back into this because I knew things like the internet and I knew research had taken leaps and bounds to look up information. So I knew I would always get back to it. I just didn't know quite when. And that's that.
So Jesse, I just want to take a moment to clarify a few things that you just said. So one, especially for our listeners, so Barbara Beeching's master's thesis at Trinity College was in the history department graduate program. That's the 1990s. Is that correct? So, right. Yeah. So we're going back to the 1990s yes. When you start to come to that. Where were you at that time? Were you living in Hartford? Because I know at one point you did live in Hartford for a brief time. Right. Were you in Boston? Were you in Hartford? Where were you at that moment?
At that time when I met Barbara, I was living in Boston.
Okay.
And like I said, we were raising a family, raising kids. I had my job. My wife had her job. So we were just kind of going.
And Barbara is also another person who really kept to it. Barbara, for our listeners, Barbara Beeching came to Trinity for her master's degree kind of later in life.
Mm-hmm.
And she finished her master's degree at Trinity. Then she went to UConn and received her doctorate. And then after that, she publishes her first book on Black history in Hartford in the 19th century in 2012, 2013, when she's 86 years old at the time, right? She was actually quite a figure, groundbreaking, like kind of energetic, relentless in many ways. And it's both amazing and not surprising given her thoroughness that she found you.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. And the other thing I wanted to just talk about really quickly is that you mentioned how Thraneve, who's your Primus ancestor, right, was adopted into the family. We're still, and I'm going to using this moment to give you a research update. I've reached out to an expert in indigenous genealogy in Connecticut just to try and get some help, because one of the things that's really maybe a little extra fascinating about your lineage is that there's a long family history of identifying Thraneve as having some indigenous connections.
Yes.
Yeah, is that correct?
That is true. Yes, that is true. And on a recent DNA test I had through Ancestry.com, there is a certain percentage of indigenous DNA in my system, whatever you want to call it. And so that gives a little more oomph to that theory. And funny story is that one of my sisters used to mention that whenever my father would have a couple of drinks, that he would talk about my grandmother being an Indian princess. And I was too young to sort of remember the stories, but my sisters remembered the stories. And I'm sure, it generated a little bit of a chuckle in the family. But there's a better chance that may have had some truth to it also. And through some of my own research, in trying to track down my grandfather, my grandfather's seems to be a whole nother story in himself from what I've been able to find about him.
Are you talking about Jesse? Jesse Harris?
Jesse H. Harris.
Jesse H. Harris, yes.
The original Jesse H. Harris.
The original Jesse H. Harris.
My grandfather, yeah. He was a character. So in tracking down, more information about him, I think there are a lot of possibilities out there. But this whole tracking down my ancestors and genealogy and putting the family together, it's an ever-evolving kind of thing, too. And I'm always finding out new things. It may take a few days or a couple of months before I find out something, but I find out things, and sometimes I shake my head in wonder, and sometimes I'll shake my head in a little, but it's always interesting to find out, because it's part of your family, and it's all part of you. So it's important to know whether it's, the good, the bad, or the ugly.
Mm-hmm. What did you find most fascinating, I guess, in your research?
Most fascinating? There have been a few fascinating things, but I will tell you a great story.
Oh.
Who would be my great uncle, Nelson Primus, Rebecca Primus's brother, who I believe has at least as compelling or possibly more compelling story than Rebecca. If you look at his whole life, he was a painter in Hartford. And he moved to Boston. He lived in Boston for about 30 years before he moved out to California and Seattle. He did one painting of, I can't recall the gentleman's first name, but his last name was Tay, T-A-Y, and he lived in Boston. And as it turned out, the portrait that Nelson did back in 1883, I believe, was of his granddaughter. Tay's granddaughter got in touch with Barbara, because she found a painting up in there. This is the classic find a painting up in the attic kind of story. And who did the painting? And we call her our sister. She is our sister, Janet. And I don't think she'll get mad for me mentioning her name. She had questioned her parents, her father, her mother, where did this painting come from? And who did the painting? And she's always been curious about the painting of her grandfather that they had. And she did some research. She got the name from her father of the artist who did it. And it was like N.A. Primus, the person who did the portrait back in 1883. And she did some research. She found out that Nelson Primus was buried at Cypress Lawn Cemetery in Colma, California. And she also got in touch with Barbara Beeching through Barbara's book. And she got the book, read the book, and she got back in touch with Barbara, asking her, were there any descendants around? And
wow.
Barbara passed on my name to Janet, and Janet got in touch with me, and we went back and forth with a couple of emails. And eventually we talked, had a very, very nice conversation. And Janet is very, very bubbly and very excited. And I got a little excited too, to be honest with you. And we met eventually. Her and her husband, they living in Florida at the time. Her husband, Bill, they came up to Boston for some other things. And we met and we had a great lunch in Boston. From then, we've just been sort of the best of friends. We call it our family ship. Aww. And, Janet is a sister to both myself and my wife, Donna. And it's been a great, since then, the portrait brought us together.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So it's a great story. It's a great story. And we've been down to Florida to see both Janet and Bill. Bill, unfortunately, passed away a couple of years ago. So we miss him. But it's been a great story of us kind of coming together, finding each other. And who knows, a portrait done in 1883 or so would have the effect it has had today.
Where's the portrait now?
Janet still has the portrait. It's her grandfather.
Well, you have this really cool painting from Nelson Primus. Do you have any other physical items from any Primus family members or Rebecca Primus herself?
I wish I did, Nicole. Rebecca Primus, a dress of hers that she had is currently at the Wadsworth Museum. I'm not sure if it's on display. It was on display last year. So that's there. It's a beautiful dress, really so nicely preserved as, for being close to 150 years old. There are letters that Rebecca had written with her friend Addie Brown, back between late 1850s up to 1868, I believe. Part of those are at the Connecticut Historical Museum. Most of them are. There are a few of them at Harvard University in Boston, and I don't have any. I wish I did, but I don't have any. But at least they do exist, so it's nice to have them.
You do have some images.
Oh, yeah, I have images. Yeah, I have plenty of images. Yes, I have tons of images.
But actual images from the 19th century, right? Those cards are from that moment, right? Yes. So you do have pieces, I would presume at some point, right? Those were in family hands.
Yes.
So,
yes.
So, yeah, it's pretty amazing that you have that. It's pretty amazing that we still have the dress, for instance, is really phenomenal. I would love to know, if you know, please let us know right now, how that dress was preserved, who took the steps to bring that into an archive. How did it wind up in the Wadsworth?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I know one of Rebecca's son-in-laws, the husband of one of her nieces, Edward Singleton, I believe. He was living with Rebecca at Adelaide Street when Rebecca passed in 1932. So I'm not sure what prompted him to do that. I don't know if it was a matter of he did it, I don't know, maybe have some finances, because they were all really poor then. I don't know how else to describe it. So I don't know if he did it out of a need for some money, or if he thought it would be great if we could preserve this. And the same with the letters. I'm not sure how that happened, but I read in Barbara's book that the letters initially had ended up in a hobby shop in Hartford. I can't recall the name of it, but it was some sort of hobby shop. And they kind of went from there. But how the progression from the family to where they ended up, I don't know. I don't have a clean look at that.
It's always very interesting to try to understand how items end up in an archive. And in this particular instance, right, how these really central and important parts of Black history. And as you said, by the time you hit the 1930s, Rebecca no longer has that economic status that she enjoyed during the 19th century, or for parts of it, right? And so even if the Wadsworth, or some in between the Wadsworth and the family, thought they were economically valuable, would pay for these artifacts, even that's fascinating too, how they gained in value over time, even in 1930 or 1940, or how these letters wind up in a hobby shop. At the very least, somebody's recognizing some value in them. And then thankfully, they wind up actually in an institution that can at least care for them and sustain them over time, and have digitized them as well. We should point that out. Both the Harvard letter and the former Connecticut Historical, now Connecticut Museum, both have digitized those writings. So they are very accessible to people.
And one of the great things is I have pictures
I have the original pictures.
That's so
That's great.
awesome.
And I have a whole book of pictures of people from that era, but I don't know who they all are. Me and my sisters have made some guesses. I'm pretty sure one of them is Nelson Primus, a younger Nelson Primus. I can't be sure, of course. Where my sister is definitely sure that one of them is of a younger Throne Eve Primus, a grandmother, as maybe a teenager. And we have various other pictures of older people, younger people, a couple of babies, and I wish I knew who they were. And I've sort of scoured, and I've checked with the Boston Public Library a couple of times to see if they may know or have any information on. I've asked about because like I said, Nelson Primus, he lived in Boston for about 30 years. And I have a picture of his daughter, Leela, that I found in the Boston Public Library, which is great.
Are these pictures like definitely something that you want to keep to your family and like in the photo album with your family, or do you see yourself putting it in museums along with other items?
That's a great question. For now, I want to keep everything in the family because we don't have much. Like I said, the dress is out there. The original letters are out there, and a lot of getting back to Nelson's portraits. He did a lot of portraits.
Yeah, he lost. Didn't you tell me an estimate once of how many he lost in the earthquake?
Yes,
what was it?
In the fire. Yeah, earthquake in the fire. Yes, it had to be.
Where was the earthquake in the
San
fire?
Francisco.
Oh.
So one of the things we haven't said is that Nelson separates himself from the rest of from the Hartford center of the Primus family. You may know why he does that or why he doesn't do that.
There's really no clear reason, but in his letters, and in a couple of his letters back home to his parents, he mentioned specifically he did not want them to let people know that he was in Boston or give him his address. But he didn't say why. I guess he just sort of maybe wanted his own life. He's an interesting character. I mean, he was married and he had Leela, his daughter, but the art was always with him in his head. And I think at times it might have consumed him too, because I think he was always thinking about it, doing the art, doing the portraits. He did a lot while he was in Boston. He did a few religious figures, family, which I'm pretty sure are in private family collections in Boston. He did a really, really nice portrait of a fellow by the name of Father Fitton, who hangs now in Holy Cross College in Worcester.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a really nice portrait. I haven't seen it, but I've seen pictures of it. It's a really nice portrait.
You haven't gone to Worcester to see it? You have gone everywhere to do everything. Wait, I have to call you out on that. Come on.
Well, eventually, it's, maybe I'll stop in on the way home.
Well, there you go. There you go.
And like the portraits he did while he was living in Seattle and in San Francisco. And I know there are a few in private collections around the country. And I remember my wife and I, Donna, when we were out in San Francisco not too long ago, he had a collector. No, I'm sorry, not San. Yeah, out in San Francisco in Oakland, the Oakland Art Museum. They have one of his original portraits. It's not on display. It's in the back room for some reason. And I checked with them. Well, do you plan on putting it on display at some point? And they said no. And I haven't really gotten a straight answer why they're not. So I said, well, if I come out there one of these days, would it be possible for me to see it? Maybe. So we'll when I cross that bridge, we'll see what happens. But they're at the Savannah School of Art and Design in Savannah, in Georgia. There's a private collector down there who has a few of his portraits. So there are a few of them around.
Wow. Yeah.
There are a few of them around.
That's great.
I would love to get my hands on one of them. So I'm holding out hope. By accident, I just happened to run across one or somewhere along the way. But he did a lot of work with that.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about Rebecca. We've talked about Throne. We've talked about Nelson. They're kind of all, although Throne is younger than Rebecca and Nelson, they're still kind of all in this same generation. But, the family goes back to Ham Primus, whose house you've been involved in trying to save and turn into some kind of historical place to gather, museum. Who knows what will come of it? But that whole line obviously extends through several generations in Connecticut. I'm just wondering, if I can give you 10 minutes with a high school audience in Connecticut, right? What chapter of the Primus story would you tell? Would it be Nelson? Would it be Rebecca? Would it be Ham? Would it be Gad Asher? Would it be you?
Well, it definitely wouldn't be me. I am the least exciting of all this. I think I would tell the chapter of the Primuses in Hartford between 1850 and maybe 1880, if that's possible. Because I think that that's a key part. There was a lot going on between Holdridge Primus and his work.
Holdridge is Rebecca's father.
Right. Between Holdridge, between Rebecca, Nelson, the other two daughters, Isabel and Henrietta. They're growing up.
And their mom is...
And their mom, Mahedable, and her
is a seamstress, but she's also very involved. She does get involved with, a variety of organizations that are involved with educating the freedmen. Like she's sitting on the board of institutions that are sending Rebecca down to Maryland to teach recently freed populations.
Right. And they've opened up their house to a lot of women in the area, young women in the area, like Addie Brown, teaching them domestic skills, be a seamstress, cooking, all that kind of stuff, and helping them pretty much have a life in a troubled time, and opening up their house to them. They had a piano in the house, I found out.
Which is pretty standard for a white middle-class family, but for a black middle-class family, right, it's just that it is, they had an economic comfort that was unusual for that moment in time.
Right.
Yeah, that actually is a question that's been on my mind as we're talking. It's like, where does the family get their wealth from? Because I know that for the average Black family in America during the time, that's kind of like rare, just because it's coming out of slavery. And I mean, of course, Black people were building lives for themselves, like in the Reconstruction era. But could you speak to?
Sure. Well, I think Holdridge, for lack of a better word, I think he worked his ass off, and raising his family.
Do we have to bleep that? I'm not sure.
I think we're mature.
Okay. He worked very hard raising the family. He was very well respected by his employers too. I mean, he had quite a bit of responsibility in terms of handling orders, handling deliveries, and people seem to like, from what I've read, people seem to like working with him. And he was so trusted by his employees that he actually went to San Francisco with one of the owners. And I think they spent like 5 years out in San Francisco with the business. Eventually he had to come back, to Hartford, of course. But by that time, his wife, Mahedable, she kind of had things going too. She was just sort of rolling along, so to speak. And they were doing their thing. I mean, they're a big part of the community, among the Black community, even though they, where they were living was mostly a white neighborhood, I believe at the time. They were still very involved with the Black community and with the church. And
this is Talcott Street Congregational, which earlier today, Jesse took a walk in downtown Hartford to try and find the original site. And he was there. He was looking for a plaque that doesn't exist yet. It's coming. But yeah, the family were longtime members of the Talcott Street Congregational Church. And that may even be one of the reasons of how Rebecca winds up in Zion Street Cemetery, is that long-standing relationship with the church, that they were willing to find a way to get her into the family plot in the 1930s when the family no longer had the means to have access to that.
Right.
So.
And I think that was another thing with the Primus family plot in Zion is quite large. So I'm guessing maybe Holdridge may have had something to do with that, and maybe help from a couple of his son-in-laws, who also seem to be very prominent in the community. They worked at the Travelers Insurance Company. They had what we would consider today sort of menial jobs as messengers and greeters. But back then, they were the best damn messengers and the best damn greeters that you can have on your business. And people loved them. People respected them. And they worked their asses off, of course. They made their way. As tough as it was, and as many obstacles as they both, subtly and obviously faced along the way. They made their way. So I'm happy with that. I'm proud to be associated with that, because I think it carries over to the generations.
Do you see this hardworking spirit continue to influence your family?
Yes, I do. Yeah. With me and my children. Yeah, my whole family, my wife. I think we sort of rub off on each other and sometimes we call it being overly responsible. But yeah, the hard work does pay off. But you do what you got to do to make things better. And I appreciate what the Primuses have done over the years and what they did, because it helped me eventually to be where I am and in terms of my life.
So Jesse, you talked about this kind of long arc of your exploration of your family history. At what point did it, maybe it hasn't, right? But at what point did it stop being a kind of personal genealogy project and become more of, I'm going to call it more of a moral commitment, a civic commitment, because you have become, I mean, obviously this dates back all the way to Barbara Beeching, but you have become the go-to, but when somebody does a Primus event, they're going to reach out to you and you're there. Like you make sure that you're available and you drive to events and you support events and you do press when people ask you to do press. You worked with the Connecticut Freedom Trail to get the Primus family in a variety of different ways on the Connecticut Freedom Trail. So at what point during this long journey did it really start to become this commitment and, less, maybe never less of family exploration, but it becomes more of this public-facing mission?
That's really an excellent question. I think it's always been there, but it's taken on a lot of new meaning since mid-2023. And I say mid-2023 is when my sister Jackie led me to an article about the Ham Primus house in Guilford. And I said, what? I said, what's this all about? And I read the article. I said, ooh. I said, ooh. And I said a lot of oohs because it took me by surprise. And I said, oh, this is really interesting. And I got in touch with the reporter who wrote the story. And I'm not sure if she quite believed me in the beginning when I told her who I was. And she directed me to Tracy Tomaselli in Guilford, one of the world's greatest genealogists, and Joel Helander, architectural genius. And I got in touch with them through emails, and we sort of went back and forth, and they both seemed very excited that I actually existed, that there was a descendant who existed. And, and I told them who exactly I was. I didn't say, well, I'm a blood relative of the Primuses. I said, well, my grandmother was adopted into my family. So, I believe being honest right from the beginning, just so they'll know. And we just kind of went up from there. And since, the thing with the house came up and sort of like, as Scott had mentioned, working on, preserving it. And Tracy encouraged me to join the Connecticut Freedom Trail, which has been, I can't say enough about the members of the Freedom Trail. It's been great to work with them. A really great, great, great group of people. I enjoy going to the monthly meetings, meeting them in person when I can. I feel a little handcuffed every now and then for some of the events that go on in Connecticut, me being in Boston. There are actually a couple of events we've come down to, my wife and I. But there are more that we would like to attend if we could. But just being a member of the committee and the help and advice and input that I've gotten from them has been fantastic. And I can't say enough about that. So since the house, I've discovered the house, Ham Primus house, my level has been sort of up here, that where I feel that this is very, very important, what I'm doing, the work that I'm doing. It's great for the family. My sisters are very appreciative and happy, and they've been discovering things along with me. My whole family's been discovering things along with me. And, when I find something new, I have to go running to my wife and say, oh, look at it, this is great. And she says, oh, wow, that's good. And she'll sit there and listen. She's been very, very supportive. I can't complain one bit. So it's at this level when things come up, like when Scott mentions that if somebody wants me for something or has some information they want to share or ask me about something or somebody, I'm always willing to be out there, because the stories need to be told and they need to be retold and retold to try to keep them out there, because it's important, especially in this time and age when certain pressures are out there to try to, it's not that important. It's not that important. We can, let's shut this down for a little while. Well, no, we don't need to shut it down. We need to probably bring them out even more, just so people don't forget. I see that as part of my, I won't call it, well, it could be a little bit of a calling. Mm-hmm. It's not a job. Although I do complain.
It looks like a job from my perspective, and I've watched you work, and I know at what time I get emails from you. I got to tell you, it looks like a job.
I do complain about it every now and then, but in the end, I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and it's given me more of a purpose in life. And I enjoy giving voice to my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my great-great-great-grandparents, and also my aunts and uncles, several of whom I've never met in life. But I know they're out there, and they, in a sense, I think they appreciate what I've done. And sometimes I joke that I wish that they would talk to me and appear to me. Yeah. And I'm not afraid from that. I would like, just because I want to know, was this really you or was this somebody else? And it gets a little silly like that. But overall, I'm happy with what I'm doing.
Do you feel like you know them personally at this point?
A few of them, yes. I'm getting to that point. Like I said, my grandfather, but they have so many kids. Yeah. And I have to kind of go back and forth between each kid and try to find a little more about the person. But with my grandfather, I've been sort of trying to trace his life from when he was born and actually how he got to Hartford to meet his first wife, who was not my grandmother. My grandmother was his second wife. So how did my grandfather end up in Hartford from Virginia and met her? But they get married at the Primus house. So he has that connection, or she has that connection to the Primus family, even before he marries my grandmother. So when he gets married to his first wife, my grandmother is living in the house. And so I'm saying...
Sounds like a little family drama there.
Yeah, it sounds a little... what kind of relationship is this, And how did Grandpa get to Hartford? That's what I'm trying to figure out right now. How did you get to Hartford from Hampton? Then from Hampton, and I know how you got from Hartford to Boston. But just figuring out that progression between him being born in Virginia, Stevensville, Virginia, and getting to Hampton, attending Hampton, graduating Hampton, being an active member of the Alumni Association. I found several articles where he was heading some committee to build a new gym and this and that, and calling all members to do this and that. And at some point, he was working in Buffalo, New York, at a train car company, luxury train car company. But I think it was for a short while. So just connecting all of those dots with his life. And he was big in politics in Everett, where they ended up, Everett, Massachusetts. He ran for the school committee a couple of times. He was the first black man to run. He didn't make it, I don't think, but he was still very involved with the schools in Everett between like 1912 and mid to late 1920s, where all the kids were going to school. My father was one of the last ones attending the Everett public schools. So he really, really interesting characters. I think I know a lot more about him, I think, right now than really anybody else. But I want to get to know the rest of the family, too, and try to get more insights into their daily lives.
If you could create a plaque for an unmarked spot tomorrow, where would it go? Who would it celebrate? What would it celebrate? In the larger Primus family history at this moment, because we just created a great plaque now. So maybe that's not a great question, but on your mind right now, like, do you have a next project of where you want to put a plaque?
Yeah, I could get in trouble if I start talking about it. Well, I would eventually like to get a plaque at the Ham Primus house, Guilford, and that depends on a lot of things too. Yeah, I have to kind of see how that goes.
Yeah, whether the Ham Primus house continues to stand is project one.
Yes. But I have a little something rolling around in the back of my head. We mentioned off the air the Rebecca Primus school site in Royal Oak, Maryland. Yeah. I had thought about the possibility of maybe looking into a plaque for that space. But then, sometimes how my mind works, I'm thinking a little beyond that. I think that, wouldn't it be great if we could recreate her school on the site? Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be a nice project?
Yes. Yeah, that would be an amazing project.
I'm in big trouble, right?
No, you're not in trouble. That would be amazing.
That would be absolutely amazing.
That would be amazing.
That would be amazing.
Now we know what to get Chaya on. Like that.
Is the Ham Primus house currently being used, or does it just stand as a house that's being honored in his memory? It just
stands as a house.
It would be so interesting if that could be turned into a museum.
Yes, it would be, wouldn't it?
We've definitely had those conversations. What we don't have is those dollars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? Yeah, we certainly don't.
Like that's kind of what's standing in the way.
Right. And the fact that the state still wants to do the dam project. I'm not sure where that stands at the moment. Right.
Just as a quick, this kind of came into public consciousness because the town was going to the house was going to be torn down as part of a traffic rearrangement. Like roads were going to move, and the dam was coming down. Right.
They were going to rebuild it.
Oh, they're going to rebuild the dam, right? Mm-hmm. And the roads were going to be rerouted as well. And the Primus house is in the way. Mm-hmm. And so, there was this great effort to save it and hopefully save it on site, even just move it. But the status is still uncertain. Mm. Saved for now, but uncertain in the longer, I think is the way to put it. So a plaque there would be great. A school. I mean, we can put a school in honor of Rebecca in Hartford too. Like there are plenty of spaces that would be certainly welcome. But, it is preserving these sites in the long run. Like in the short term, getting a plaque up. I don't want to say it's simple because we've just done some work and it's not simple. Right. But trying to think in the longer term over generations of how to institution build, create enough institution around some of the Primus historical sites. That's a much bigger challenge. That's why it's great that the letters are in an institution that hopefully will be around for a while, right? I mean, so some of those markers can be around, but it is an interesting question. Like 20 years from now, how does this family history stay and stay vibrant? Because it is vibrant, but as Jesse noted earlier, right, it has to be told and retold and shared. Right. And that is both the challenge and the beauty of some of this work.
Right. Yeah, it is a challenge. But I mean, it's a good challenge. And I'm willing to keep it going because anytime anybody asks me, I'm willing to tell them the story. And I've told people many stories, and it's good. It's great. I mean, people are always interested. And they say, okay, well, tell me to stop if you want me to stop talking. I'm learning to stop talking. So I'm learning. My wife says, at one point you didn't talk enough. Now you're talking too much. I said, well, hey, you know how it goes. I'm getting older, so I just kind of go on and on and on.
To see pictures from the event, including the headstone, visit our Instagram page at Primus Project Trinity. Don't forget to follow.
There are also a variety of really great resources to learn more about the Primus family and Rebecca Primus. Barbara Beeching, who was once a master's student at Trinity College, wrote Hopes and Expectations on Black middle-class life in Hartford. So grab a copy of Hopes and Expectations, which has some really great material on the Primus family. There's also Beloved Sisters and Loving Friends, another book, this one by scholar Farah Jasmine Griffin, which focuses on Rebecca's life through the remarkable correspondence she had with her romantic partner, Addie Brown. The letters between these two women really provide an intimate and a rare look into Black women's lives and community and love in the 19th century.
To continue engaging with this history, search the Connecticut Freedom Trail for the two Primus sites, the Primus family resting ground at Zion Hill Cemetery and the Ham Primus house in Guilford, Connecticut. Visit these places, engage with these places, because that's how Black history comes alive.
The research of the Primus Project was made possible by the Henry Luce Foundation and at Trinity College, the Office of the President, the Office of the Dean of the Faculty, and the Public Humanities Collaborative. Please search Primus Project Trinity College in your browser to find more information about the project, including its research and contact details. Thank you for listening to the Primus Project Podcast. We look forward to connecting with you in our upcoming episodes.